Mom? Mom? How you doing? You alright?
Yeah, man.
Alright, because I'm here cutting up some plantain. I'm gonna fry some plantain now.
What? Where are you?
I wish I was in your kitchen. I wish I could be in your kitchen right now, frying some plantain for you. Love you, Mom. Miss you.
Yes, I miss you too.
One of the best things about growing up in Jamaica is the kind of family bonding that goes on. So every Sunday we'd go to church, but also a Sunday meal was a family meal. From as little as I can remember growing up with my mom by her side in the kitchen, watching her create all these fantastic meals. And I can feel her standing by my side whenever I'm cooking, and she'll tell me not too much salt, not too much seasoning. Make sure you taste your food, always keep your eye on the pot. That was always at the back of my mind, still is, it's still there. I think a wake-up call for me was right after my diagnosis, failing health slowly coming in. I was losing weight. I become withdrawn. I become very reclusive. And these are things that my mom noticed. And she made that point over and over again. And then one morning, she said to me, are you sick? Do you have AIDS? It was a very poignant moment. It was a very poignant question coming from somebody that cared about me and who I cared about a lot. And having that conversation was difficult, but not as difficult as I thought it would have been, because my answer instantaneously was yes. Yes, I'm living with HIV. I'm not dying yet.
I think for a long time after my diagnosis, every time that something bad would happen, or I'd have an off day, I would go straight to HIV and be like, it's because of this. My immediate questions of myself were, how did I let this happen? Why did this happen to me? And they were questions about looking back on what I'd done before, rather than thinking what's going to happen now. And for a lot of people, it is a world-shattering, traumatic experience, and it has the potential to derail you. I've since read and heard about post-traumatic growth, and that's something which a lot of people are talking about within the HIV community, that people go through something really quite difficult and end up creating something even better out of it. And that actually has been a source of empowerment for me, because you suddenly realise, okay, if I can process this one thing that's happened in my life, then I'm probably strong enough to process the other things that are going to happen. And I'm never going to go back to the same person I was 2 years ago. We all change constantly. Life is a process, and this is just one thing that's happened to me in my life. But everyone goes through things in their lives, which mean that they can't go back to who they were before, and that's okay.
Definitely one of the darkest times was when I decided to travel back to Uganda in 1994 with the sole purpose of dying. I thought that at that point there was nothing to live for. I thought that I had lived for 6-7 years since my diagnosis. I didn't see a way forward. If somebody told me that I would feel so comfortable in my skin, that I would not be afraid of telling people about my HIV status, that I would live well with it and be happy and do normal things, I wouldn't believe them.
And I kind of use that moment as a kind of one of those things in life where you go, okay, things are pretty rough now, but they're going to be great, aren't they? If you decide they're going to be great. And I actually discharged myself from a hospital, came home, and the following Monday went to the Bloomsbury. And it was just that drive. And I remember taking, and by that Thursday I was on my first antiretrovirals course. That night I came home and I started to sort of fantasize in my head about little old ladies knitting white blood cells for me and knights on chargers spearing the HIV virus. And within a month my CD4 was over 100 from 30 and my viral load was nearly undetectable, very, very low indeed. So,
You know, like many other young people, I grew up in Kenya, right? And so when I was growing up, I had 4 things that I really wanted to achieve in my life, hopes and dreams. And the first thing I wanted to do was to get a degree, because for us it was really important. We weren't necessarily very well off. And I also wanted to learn how to drive. I wanted to live in a 2-bedroomed house with lots of plants and rugs. And I wanted to have 4 daughters, okay? I didn't quite plan for a partner or a husband. So I don't know how I was going to get those 4 children, but I knew I wanted to have 4 daughters. And so when I was diagnosed, I thought, okay, that's my dream of having a baby gone. 5 years after my diagnosis, I had a child, and luckily she was born HIV negative because I had access to the medication. So it made a big difference to my life from when I was diagnosed to when there was very little hope, to now reaching a point whereby you can actually start a family and have an HIV negative baby. That was a big thing for me.
I think one of the first things that struck me right after I got my diagnosis was where, what, when am I going to get support? Living with HIV, it's not just about taking the pills every day. It was more about dealing with managing that, managing life and the other things that come with living. And that was when I got signposted to the Bloomsbury Clinic. And it was almost, for me, it was life transforming. It was almost miraculous that this is what I've been looking for all along. That's when I started, because I was receiving all of this support and it was effective, it was working. I thought, yes, my next step, I want to do some volunteering. I'm planning to work. And what is my journey going to be like? What do I need to do? And I think I became obsessed with living. When we lose that focus on self and become more engaged with our wider community and building healthy, positive relationships, that's where we begin to thrive.
After I got diagnosed, I remember thinking that living with HIV had to consume you, and that anyone living with HIV, that was going to be the first thing you noticed about them. They'd walk into a room and you'd be like, another person living with HIV. So when I was invited to go on the newly diagnosed course, I assumed that going into the room, there would just be a lot of people looking a bit sad, maybe looking a bit unwell, struggling to live. And I walked in, and there were the Bloomsbury Clinic patient reps, smiling, open, just being happy, in quotes, normal. And that was a real game changer for me.
And for me, one of the things that I find really, really enriching is being able to support a woman who's newly diagnosed, and watching them change and become confident and leave me behind. And I'm like, yes, that's what I really want. And for me, I don't think I would have been so passionate about passing on skills had I not been diagnosed with HIV, because I know how important it is to be able to come out the other side.
It was about 2 hours of going to this support group, and I sat in the back silently listening to these amazing women tell their stories. And I thought, I wanted to be like those amazing women. I wanted to live again. that as my journey continues, I always go back to that point, because that's when I stopped focusing on dying and started to focus on living. And when I said living, I started to live, enjoying my life and living it with purpose, not just living, and appreciating that life. Things mushroomed from there, and I started to be an advocate, started to become an activist, and started to support others in a more practical manner, helping, in terms of imparting knowledge around treatment, around policy issues, around even speaking in Parliament, in the UK Parliament, even speaking at the UN.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides. Just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soul's cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the hearts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
Are you ready?
No. Can't be any worse than childbirth though.
It's incredible how many tattoo artists don't understand things about HIV and don't understand that it is very difficult to catch through tattooing.
It is important to see that actually you still can have tattoos, you still can have children, because I think as soon as you get diagnosed, you're like, that's it, game over.
Yeah.
And it's so not game over at all.
It's the amount of people that I've actually spoken to, just general people, that I say that I know you and that you've had children since you've had HIV and things like that, and that your children don't have it, and that your husband doesn't have it, and there are medications that help it to stop crossing the placenta and stuff, and they're like, what? Like, they instantly think HIV, death sentence, that's it, everyone you come into contact with.
Yeah.
And it's not true. It's just not true.
My tattoo is made up of several different parts. The butterfly wing signifies the change pre and post diagnosis, because pre-diagnosis, my life was a bit of a train crash. It's a bit of a mess, and so after diagnosis I've become a lot more sensible and a lot more grown up. The red ribbon is to remember the people that have lost their lives to HIV and also those that are still living and suffering with it. The eye symbolises, because it's placed down low as well, it's symbolising watching over the subject of HIV and raising that awareness. So just being mindful of it all the time. And then the tear is the pain of the diagnosis and the pain of the stigma that goes with it and having to explain yourself all the time.
In the year since my diagnosis, my relationship to disclosure has changed quite a lot. I remember I was working on a performing job around Christmas, and I was comfortable in telling people about HIV, but I wasn't sure how to do that in the workplace, around people I was working with, performing with, living with. And it was World AIDS Day when we were there, and I was wearing my red ribbon. And one of my colleagues just openly asks me, "Are you HIV positive?" And I've always said I would never lie about it, because I'm not ashamed. And so I said, yes, I am. It was just a fact about me. And I didn't worry after that it was out there, that he knew. And I'm now at a place where if it comes up in conversation, it's just a fact about me. Like, I have size 11 feet, or I'm a Gemini, or I'm from Hertfordshire. It's as incidental as those other facts about me. I'm really glad I'm at that place, because for a long time it felt like something huge that once it was out there I couldn't gauge anymore. And that's still the case, but you have to just learn to live with that.
And I thought, okay, this diagnosis, I have no problem with who knows. Because if I don't have that strength to do that, the world won't become a better place. And it certainly is not a deep, dark secret or something to be ashamed of. I don't have that shame. And so why would I put that inside myself that would work against my very well-being, you know?
So the number one question I always get asked when I drop into conversation that I have HIV.
Do you know who gave it to you?
And I really, really want to jazz it up with something stupid, like I was dressed as a clown, working on a cruise ship, and had an accidental orgy.
I still haven't got a bloody clue. How do I know? I don't even, not only that, I don't care.
Or I was at a party with a group of and somehow I just fell.
Well, you didn't get it from stroking a cat, did you?
It's ridiculous. I had sex. I did the same as everybody else. There's not a special way of having sex to contract HIV. You don't have to have one leg around the back of your head and that's how you get it.
Honesty is the final frontier for us to be able to win the battle against HIV. The more we're honest about it, the more we can just be open about it. It's sexually transmitted. It's something that people get, that honesty will help break down those final societal barriers, and it will help us conquer this illness.
As a single woman living with HIV, this is the first time I've been single since my diagnosis. So I thought I'd do a bit of a social experiment and put 2 dating profiles online. So one of my profiles was very normal, and it was just me, and then I'd casually drop into conversation about having HIV and gauge their responses. And then the other one, my subject line was, "I have HIV, what have you got?" And from that one, I got a lot of sarcastic comments. Now, some of them, when they realised I was serious and I did really have it, they would then start asking questions. So they've become more aware of it. So hopefully they're more inclined to then consider dating someone with HIV. But some of them, they were absolutely terrified. Even though they were the opposite end of a computer screen, they were terrified of me. And that was really, really odd, because you don't know what kind of reaction. If I was to go out and meet somebody, I don't know whether they would reject me or whether they would accept me. And it's that fear of the unknown that I think keeps people from actually talking about HIV.
In a way, you have to take humor out of a difficult situation. And I actually find that even with my close friends who live with HIV, we spend a lot of time laughing. We laugh a lot, and we are able to switch adversity into something that is, funny, and deal with it, Sometimes the things that we're going through are not that easy, they're challenging, but when we've come through the other side, we're able to make a joke about it. And that's how we live,
Because of where I'm at in my life as a middle-aged menopausal woman, I never thought menopause would feel so good. I feel empowered to be able to brave anything and to talk about anything, and it is incredibly liberating.
I went away to New Zealand for a month travelling, and I wasn't really planning to spend the whole month on my own, but I did spend a huge amount of it travelling totally by myself. And there were several moments I can remember where I was totally alone in nature, on the side of a glacier, or by a lake, or on a beach, or in a mountain hut. And I suddenly realised how small I was in the whole grand scheme of the world. And this thing that happened to me last year, which felt like the biggest thing that was ever going to happen to anyone, suddenly took on a sense of proportion. I'm one of millions of people living with HIV, and one of billions of people on this planet. It might seem significant to me, but I can deal with it because it's not the biggest thing in the world, by any stretch. And that sense of proportion and kind of balance with the huge magnitude of nature made me feel a lot more comfortable with it. You know, I can deal with this because I am smaller than the grand scheme of all this. And someone in particular looked at some of my photos and said, there's a fearlessness in your eyes in these photos which I've never seen before.
I often wondered if it was me that was holding back myself from engaging because of my own self-stigma and my own perception of discrimination, of being excluded from society, not engaging for fear of disclosure. And I very often wonder how much of a barrier that has been that I've put up for myself. And then somehow I've managed to suppress the whole idea that HIV was me and realize actually it's just a very, very small part of my life.
When I was heavily pregnant, I went to see Ben Howard live, and this song, when Ben started singing this song, I was seated in the disabled area, so you could see right down onto the stage, so we were really close. And when he started singing this song, Logan was moving around in my stomach, he was going crazy. So yeah, this song's got some really special like memories to it. So, yeah, I love this song.
Depth over distance is all I asked of you, and I may be foolish to fall as I do. Still there's strength in the blindness you feel.
I have 3 children. One's nearly 18, one's 5, and one's 2.5. They're just general typical kids. They're quite cheeky, quite noisy. The 18-year-old's quite sensible, so I'm quite proud of her. She's a very sensible girl, wants to be a detective when she's going into work. One of them, she wants to be a doctor and a princess. That's the 5-year-old. And the 2.5-year-old is possibly going to be a stripper. So we've decided that he's on a road of his own. He loves his nail varnish, his sparkly shoes. So yeah, he likes being naked. So there's every chance he's going to be a stripper at some point. My 18-year-old, she knew about 3 years after diagnosis. I knew I wanted to have more children, but I didn't know whether it was possible or not because, firstly, living with HIV, you don't know if anyone's going to want to make babies with you. And then, secondly, you don't know how you're going to make babies. So it is very, very possible to have children after your diagnosis who don't have HIV. Both of my children have tested negative for HIV. But it is very terrifying to start with because you think it's not possible. I want to raise my children to stand up for what they believe in, and I'm not going to I'm not going to keep quiet about my diagnosis in case they're bullied at school, because I'm going to raise my children to know my status and to educate people who aren't educated on it. And they will be little vocal activists for it if they want to. I'm not going to say to them, don't tell anyone because people might bully you, because people might bully them anyway. So the more people that can talk about HIV, the more educated people are going to be, the less stigma there's going to be out there, and the easier it's going to be for people to come out and say.
So I told her that I'm going to do this interview, and my photograph is going to be in social media, etc. And is that okay with you? She said, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, but your friends might actually see me if they go online. He said, Mom, my friends all know you have HIV. And I'm like, how do they know that? He said, oh, I told them. And I'm like, why did you tell them? He said, well, my friends are around you all the time. They come home, they eat, you do their hair. And so for me, if they're not comfortable about being around you or being around somebody living with HIV, then I don't want them in my life.
For all the challenges that I've been through in my life, I think my diagnosis and living with HIV has been one of the most cathartic. There's been almost a conversion, and it wasn't predetermined, it just happened that way. And it happened, and I think I spent a couple of years going to accept the fact that, okay, so this has happened. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to let it beat me, defeat me? No. I've actually allowed it, supported it to empower me to become who I am today. I'm not saying that I'm happy that I contracted HIV or that I was a part of a process that I am living with HIV. But were it not for that process, for that happening, I don't think I would have embarked on the journey that I embarked on.
My diagnosis kind of woke me up. It made me grow up and take responsibility and start planning for my future. And I never thought I would say, sat in that chair being told you have HIV, I never thought I'd fast forward 8 years and go, my life is better for having it, but it genuinely is.
It's funny, when you have a sort of a minor car accident, which is really what the diagnosis was, you then really do decide, do you know what, I may not want to do that trip again, or I may want to live my life in a slightly different way. And all that empowerment is inside you. It's just so important to work out what it is you want. Certainly, the HIV diagnosis did not paralyse me or freeze me with fear. Completely the opposite, actually. I kind of thought, okay, this has now happened. What do I now want to get? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? And how do we achieve that?
Knowing that we've moved from an era whereby there was no hope and all doctors could do was provide palliative care for dying people, to a point whereby people are asking, is what I hopes and dreams for the future, is just really quite incredible. And I feel very lucky to have lived through that era and to still be alive today to be able to share my story.
I really do feel that on this HIV journey, I'm a much better person than I could ever have been. I'm more compassionate, I think. I'm exposed to things I never knew I would be exposed to in the very best of ways. I'm more engaging as a person, I'm more thoughtful, and life is just so much more interesting, so much more, so much more purposeful and satisfying than anything I ever hoped for. I've been given a second chance to live, and that second chance shouldn't be treated lightly. But most importantly, if you're virally suppressed, you can't even pass it on. I mean, I don't think that many of us envisioned that happening in our lifetime. So if that has happened, so much more can happen. You know, I feel completely privileged, and I do hope that there are others like me who feel the same way.